Ew, ew, big fish-ish. Y'all know what it is. We got a good topic for y'all today. And I kind of stumbled across it. I'm not sure. I can't really remember if it was in, one of the books that I'm reading or if I stumbled across it on a video, but I saw it, heard it, and then it prompted me to kind of go do a little bit of digging, not too much, but just looking up a couple different articles on what we have, I guess, come to call generational trauma and generational fear. Now, my understanding of generational trauma was a little bit different than how this scientific study broke it down. I believe it was Emory University, but it may have been a few other studies as well. But they did a study on mice. They couldn't really do it on humans. However, they did it on mice, and it may have revealed things that dig a little bit deeper, go a little bit deeper than how we were already seeing generational trauma. Now, when I think of generational trauma, I think about, kid, black community, our children growing up without fathers, and it creates a cycle to where you don't have the leadership in your household. You're more likely to be locked up, be involved in dangerous activities that can either land you dead or in jail. We all know how it plays out that way. However, what I want to focus on is the fear aspect. The fear aspect and how that fear can be transitioned from generation to generation. So let me tell you about the study first, and then we'll kind of walk through where my mind was taking me as I was learning more and more about it. So they did a study on mice, and I'm loosely, this is loosely, but no, this is the study as far as what I'm describing isn't loosely, but just bear with me. So they did a study on mice, and they had a poison. They had a poison in which it had a certain smell. So the poison had a certain smell. So rat poison, mice poison, it had a certain smell. I guess those mice then had kids. The offspring of those mice had never been exposed to, or they were kept away from their parents. They were kept away from their parents. So it's not like their parents could have communicated that particular fear or described the scent, anything like that. So when those mice were kept away from their parents, when they were introduced to that exact smell that was associated for their parents with being poisonous or death, whatever, however they associated it, they had a reaction to avoid it. Think about that. Think about that. Mice parents, right? The parents, they had offspring. The parents were introduced to a poison that had a particular scent, smell. When the parents had their children, the offspring was separated from their parents, and then the offspring was introduced to that exact scent. And they were turned off by it. They avoided it at all costs. And that, to me, was mind-blowing. Because a lot of times when we think about things getting passed down, it's more so through behavior. Behavior. I'll give you an example. If you're an obese parent, you may be more likely to have obese children because you're going to live a particular lifestyle that maybe has led you to being obese. If you're more, I don't know, I guess I don't want to get into necessarily like the addicts, like the chemical addictions, but that's how I've seen it in the past, where because of a particular parent's behavior, we can see how it directly impacts the child. But that's through experiences with the parent or the lack of the parent being there. You get what I'm saying? So it's through a direct experience. So it's not as if something was passed down to the kid as far as how we think of it. It's not as if something was passed down to where we focus on more learned behavior, learned things being passed down, unless it's, we've heard about like diabetes, heart disease and all these things. And to me, that's more lifestyle based as well, because I know that they tend to say that diabetes can be passed down. I'm not sure where I stand on that. I'm not even sure where the science stands on that, to be totally honest. However, to me, I'm looking at it and say like, well, even if it's not technically passed down through genetics, it's going to be passed down, so it would be more likely to happen just based on behavior. You know, if you're eating certain things and live a certain lifestyle that's going to, lead your parents to getting diabetes, then when they have you, they'll probably live the same lifestyle, introduce that lifestyle to you to where you'll be more at risk for diabetes. And it goes both ways. It goes, I know I'm focusing on the negative aspects, but if your parents tend to read a lot, if your parents work out a lot, if your dad plays professional basketball, you're probably more likely to at least try basketball. So that's just the behavioral side of things based on the experience with the learned behavior and how it impacts us. However, this is something different. This is the equivalent, at least how I'm receiving it as, when you have a certain fear. That means that whether or not I tell my child about a particular fear of mine, whatever it may be, it could be a fear of poverty. It could be fear of a particular animal, any fear. It could be a fear of a group of people. These fears can be passed down to where it's instilled in that child without it being taught to that child. Think about how powerful that can be. So for me, when I'm absorbing that information, it makes it that much more important to live a life, a fearless life, and to make sure that I'm living, believing, knowing the life that I want my kids to live. Let me say that again. I need to make sure that I'm breathing, living, believing, knowing. Everything that is in me that I'm living, I have to make sure that that's the example that I want set for my children. And it's not just based on what they see or they don't see or my direct impact, but there's an indirect to the point where you may not even discuss something, but fear can be passed down. So it got me thinking about a bunch of stuff. So my dad is the youngest of 9 kids. He's the only one not born on a sharecropping farm in South Carolina. And his perception and his fears in a lot of ways are totally different than a lot of his older siblings. Him being the youngest, he didn't grow up on the farm in the South, in the 30s and 40s. He didn't grow up in that. Like he just wasn't, he wasn't picking cotton and doing all these different things that his brothers and sisters had to do. He wasn't living in an environment where the racial tensions were a little bit different. Even South Carolina, different than New York City. So therefore, those fears, he didn't actively have them as much. Now, based on the study, they still may have been transferred, through what my grandfather, his father, lived. However, he wasn't impacted as much as it by his brothers and sisters, because they not only had whatever was passed down to them, but they had the experience that they were actively going through. So my dad has always told me that his oldest brother, grew up a lot different than him. And therefore, his outlook on life was a lot different. His outlook towards white people was a lot different. There was a certain level of fear that was associated with the relationship between him and dealing with white people that my dad didn't necessarily have. I'm sure my dad had, certain, things, where it was race related. However, it was totally different than growing up on a sharecropping farm in South Carolina like my uncle did. And especially him being older, to actually understand what was happening in the South, for him to see how my grandparents were treated by blacks and whites in the South, and how he was able to see how blacks and whites interacted in the South. So that fear that was in him, now I guess it depends on when you have your children, but all those fears, we have to understand that our offspring may take on those fears. Now, we already understood the behavioral side of things, like the generational trauma and stuff passed down. But I'm not sure, like I said, maybe other people are focusing on it and I'm just not. But to me, it was so mind blowing because there's a lot of fears that I have. There's a lot of fears that, we overcome, all of us, whether it's a fear of poverty, a fear of losing a loved one, a fear of, to transitioning to the next life or wherever, life that is, or just losing a loved one in your life. We all have those type of fears. And when I read these books that I've been reading, which I said, it's not crazy, it's not wild, it's all alignment. And it's a lot of connecting the dots. The more information that you're exposed to, you're able to connect certain dots that make sense to connect and that align. So therefore, when I'm reading about, how important it is to overcome fear, how you have to confront fear just as if it's any other challenge in our lives, maybe confront it even stronger and overcome those things, because a lot of times what we fear, that's what our minds are going to focus on. We've talked about the term of auto-suggestion. Our minds auto-suggest different energy coming in. It just automatically does it, just with our conscious. Like the things that we're thinking about the most, we're inviting those things into our lives because that's the energy we're putting out. Therefore, that's the energy that we're asking to come back to us, whether we like it or not, which is why when we talk about being around like people who just focus on the negative, they can create cancers. Whether you're on a sports team, we talk about that a lot. Negative people just create cancers, and negative people tend to invite other negative energy into their lives. So I'm sure we've all been around people, maybe it's us, where all we do is focus on the negative, and then we get mad when only negative stuff comes back to us. So when we talk about the importance of, when I read a book like The Law of Success or Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich or Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David, when I'm reading all those books and they're focusing on how important fear, the factor of fear is in whether or not we'll become successful, I have to think and connect it to a study like this. So we kind of have to take that into account, because I don't think that, I'll just speak for myself, that I've looked at, fear in the past as something that I need to overcome because I don't want to pass it on to my future offspring. I don't look at it like that. I looked at it as, it's not anything that's going to directly transition into them a fear of mine. It's more so the learned behavior based on the experiences that they have directly with me. That's how I looked at it. But now looking at this new study, I have to take into account that I am accountable. I have to be accountable, and I'm responsible. It is my duty to overcome every single fear that I have, because if I don't, then I'm putting that on my future kids. Think about that. Think about that and how that changes the perspective of how we'll address fear and how we'll attack and confront fear and how we'll eventually overcome fear. Think about that. Because a lot of times I think most of us, I know me, you just look at the fear as something that is more about you, more about us. It's not necessarily, we don't have the urgency to where if it was like, hold on, this is dangerous to my kids. Me not overcoming this particular challenge, this particular fear of mine, and me just allowing it to grow within me is unfair to my child. It's putting my child in a terrible position to flourish as they're growing, because they're going to inherit the very same fears that I was too lazy, too scared, too nervous, too whatever to not overcome, to not attack, to not conquer. We have to conquer our fears, and we have to look at it as this is a duty and responsibility to my offspring. And when we place that type of urgency and emphasis on it, just with me, that's gonna That's going to give, I mean, I don't, maybe some people don't need any added inspiration, motivation, courage, whatever you want to call it, but that's got to give you a little more juice in your tank. I don't have kids, so, but I've spoken to people with kids. I study people with kids. You know, when I say I study great people, and a lot of the great people have kids. And I've always noticed how, you know, a lot of times kids, they add a different level of motivation. Now, maybe people are just saying that, but to me, it makes sense. When you bring something else into this world, bring another human being into this world that you created, I would assume that there's an added level of accountability and responsibility that you would have to take on. And obviously, we see situations where people don't step up to the plate in those circumstances. However, if you're a stand-up person and if you're a true leader, then you never want the people that you're leading to feel pain or to feel anything that's going to hold them back that you could have confronted yourself. I'm reading in this book right now, I'm on the chapter on leadership, and they're talking about never put your men, they were talking about the army, never put your men in a position that you wouldn't put yourself in those very same shoes. Never to have your man go do something that you wouldn't do. And that's the same thing. Like, it's the same concept as far as if you are a leader, it is your duty to keep the people that are following you, that are invested in you, that trust you safe, right? We talk about leaders. What do leaders do? Protect and provide, right? And guide. That's what a leader does. Protect, provide, guide. And to do those things, it is our duty. It's not like just something we can do, you know, if we feel like doing. No, it's a duty. It's a duty. It's a duty. Your kids didn't ask to be born. None of our kids asked to be born. I didn't ask to be born. And as a leader, when you bring something out, when you bring another human being into this world that didn't ask to come here, it has to go above and beyond anything trivial. It has to be a duty. Like, this is what you have to do. This is a part of your purpose. This is your chief purpose, your chief aim. They use the term in the book that your definite chief purpose or definite chief aim. What could be more important? And I want us to think about all the things that we're truly fearful of. And I want us to think about how it's impacted us over the years. And maybe just focusing on our existence since slavery. You know, a lot of us like to talk about slavery. And really, regardless of what side your particular relatives, ancestors would have been on, looking at it from all different perspectives. Because, and I'll tell you why. Looking at it from my perspective, you know, just what my ancestors faced, I'm looking at it like, yo, they had to scare the hell out of these people. They had to scare the hell out of my ancestors for us to just, I don't even know if we've talked about this before as far as like whether slavery was a choice or not. I don't want to get into that, but for my ancestors to accept and to rationalize being enslaved for hundreds of years over the or else. And the or else is whatever would happen if, you know, you woke up and said, I ain't doing this no more. Either I'm running away, revolting, mixture of both. It is what it is. And I'm willing to die because of it, which a lot of our ancestors did. But the fear that had to be placed, like intellectual fear, physical fear, all these different fears, fear for my loved ones, fear for my kids, my family, all these different fears, fear of the unknown. When we have those fears, it had to be at such a high level to justify being enslaved for hundreds of years. And I think about how powerful that fear, because that's a poison in itself. So I go back to the mice example, where that poison was passed down, the scent of that poison, and to avoid it was passed down to the offspring. Imagine what's been passed down to us. And I don't want us to imagine what's been passed down to us from a victim standpoint. Y'all know I don't do the victim stuff. I'm a superhero. I don't care if anybody else believes it. I would love for my loved ones to believe it. However, I'm a superhero regardless of what anybody else thinks, because I never want to look at myself as a victim, because as soon as you put yourself in a victim position, you're less than. No, I'm all powerful. We already went over this with the OG values and principles. I can do anything. So for me to have that mindset, I can't be a victim today and then, I can do they just don't live in the same place. And I'm not saying whether I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's my decision to choose to look at it that way. I'm looking at it from that lens rather than the victim lens. So, but I also have to understand, going back to the point, I also have to understand the fear that has been passed down to me. Because when I'm moving through life, having conversations with, different people, whether it's my age, younger, older, my older relatives, my parents, my uncles, aunts, when I'm having conversations with people, especially people that are older than me, and I can't understand like why they see things the way they see things, why they're more emotionally attached to certain things, why certain things trigger them, that I'm willing to just say, remove all that emotions. I don't care. I'm thinking with logic. Why they may not necessarily be able to do that. And you hear it all the time with stuff where, real quick, I'm not going to get into politics, I promise. But just to make a point, you'll talk to a lot of, especially older black people, and they don't care about Biden's policies. They don't care about Trump's policies. Even if Trump's policies benefit us, it's, that dude's an asshole. He's a racist. I don't care. I don't like him. That's that. But I have to also be sensitive to the fact and aware of the fact that their trauma and their fear, because they are more directly tied to it, because they're closer to slavery, they're closer to the fear that my grandparents and the generations before us felt. They're closer to it. So therefore, it may impact and affect the way that they see things. So where I may look at it in most situations and be just insensitive to it and just say like, what did y'all gotta, say a bunch of stuff. We talked about it before where my dad, his friend, my parents obviously spent a lot of time down in Florida. I've told y'all this before. And one of his friends told him, he said, I can't be down there. He's like, no. He said, I can't be down there. Talking about because it's mostly Republicans. So, and for me, I think he made the comment like it's a red state or something like that. I don't know. But for me, I'm looking at it like, I don't care what state it is. I'm living where I want to live, period. But that generation is more sensitive to it because that fear is more, it's a realer fear for them. And that's not always a bad thing. That's not always a bad thing. Fear can save us from a lot of situations as well. However, I'm more looking at it from a standpoint that if fear can be passed down, then can courage be passed down? Can the positive aspects be passed down? Because we know the trauma that the fear has caused. We know just the generational trauma and how that's impacted us. So I'm looking at it like, hold up, okay. Like all this stuff was passed down. I have some of it in me. So it is my duty to make sure that my offspring has as little as possible, if any, of it at all. My goal has to be for my offspring to be fearless. Shout out to Jason Whitlock and his show Fearless. But see, that's, we talk about freedom, but fearless. I don't know what freedom is. It's hard for me to wrap my arms around that concept. But when it comes to being fearless, I know, I think I know I think I have a better grip on that, a better understanding of that and how it impacts us and what being fearless looks like, or feels like, because I've been in certain situations where I had fear and I know how it impacted me. And I've been in other situations where I was fearless and how it impacted me. And not to say that one or the other was always good or always bad, but what comes with fearlessness, and as I'm thinking about it, maybe it's good to start off with fear and overcome it, because you learn a lot about yourself through overcoming it. You get what I'm saying? So, but it's a gift and a curse, because for people who can't overcome it, see, most people aren't going to be able to overcome stuff. Most people don't overcome trauma. That's why there's the topic of generational trauma, because it's a cycle that is damn near undefeated. And for us to break that cycle, it takes a lot of work, a lot of courage, a lot of discipline, a lot of courage, a lot of fearlessness. And it's, if you have that fear in you, then it's very hard for us to break that cycle that I'm talking about. So, as I'm thinking about it, just having the conversation with y'all, I guess the ideal situation could be, because we all want to learn lessons, right? That's why we play sports. That's why we do different things in life as kids, so we can learn different lessons to apply later on in life to be successful. But we also see a lot of kids who are given a silver spoon, and they don't learn those lessons that a lot of other kids who may have more hardships learn. So it's a gift and a curse. And it's like a balancing game. You don't want too much of this, because then my kid may end up, too many hardships. Kid may not make it. My kid may be in a terrible position, not in a position to flourish. But too little hardships where my kid has a silver spoon, it's like, he may not be equipped, or she may not be equipped to deal with the realities that life is going to face us, the challenges and the hardships. So I guess ideally you want to teach those lessons in ways through sports. That's why sports is so cool, because it teaches you real life lessons that can mean life or death in reality, but it's just sport, right? It's just sport. So it's one of those things where it's not cookie cutter, but it's something for us to think about and for us to consider, because the ability to accomplish anything comes down to our ability to overcome our fears. Our ability to overcome our fears. Simple as that. So it's something that we got to think about. It's something that we got to think about, and it's something that we have to figure out a way to flip, to use in our best interest, in our favor, because a lot of stuff, a negative, when you see opportunities and everything, we're always figuring out how to solve problems, how to get the most out of this particular challenge, how to make sure that I'm learning lessons, how to make sure that I'm passing down certain lessons to the next generation. So it's important for us to be aware of the fact that not just our height, gets passed down, not just our skin color or, what texture of hair that we have, but there's and I guess I would call it a spiritual aspect of it. That's the spirit aspect, the things that may not be able to be described in a physical sense, through physical science. there's a certain aspect of a spiritual generational trauma, where that trauma can be transferred spiritually. And by knowing that, how can we flip the switch? How can we flip the switch? Because we need to start transferring that fearlessness and that courage down to the next generations, because that's what we need. That's what we need. And we're going to do a video maybe after this, definitely after this, that just talks about, we'll save that subject for the next video. But what I really want to focus on was just for this video was that aspect of the fear, the scent. Think about the scent of a fear. Like, I don't need to be told that that particular smell, it's toxic. It's not good for me. That touch, this particular situation, how it looks, I don't think I've been here before, but something's telling me that I've seen this situation play out before, and it's not a good one. And we always say there's a yin and a yang, right? So the opposite can be, I've seen this situation play out and it's a positive one. So I guess they'll have to do another mice study on more of the positive aspects of it, because I'm interested to know if something, let's say if they were exposed to something that they really liked and that scent, and if they're separated from their offspring, the mice, to where they can't teach their offspring about that pleasant smell or that pleasant sensation, whatever it is, I'm wondering if they would gravitate towards it based on it being something pleasant that their parents experienced. So, just something to think about, because fear is such we just all see it holding so many people back. Fear holds so many of us back. And a lot of times we'll just think about like the physical fears, but there's a lot of other fears and demons that we're all confronting, that we're all looking to overcome, that we all want to fight the good fight for. So it's just something to be intentional about. And get an understanding as to why you may be fearful of certain things. Who knows? It may open up some conversations with your parents or your kids, to say like, yo, is this something that you are fearful of? Or it may help you look at your parents and that generation a little bit differently, to where you can have a certain level of empathy that you didn't otherwise have. So that way you can get to a more common ground and have more understanding conversations. So it goes both ways. But just wanted to share that with y'all. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Y'all take a look at the study. Like I said, I believe it was, what did I say? It was Emory University. I believe Emory University put it up about 9 years ago, or at least they did a story on it. But I'm interested actually to kind of take a look at. I want to find out where I actually first saw it. Because I'm telling you, I forgot. I don't know. Maybe it was passed down. Maybe it was passed down. Who knows? But yeah, I'm definitely going to take a look at that, be more intentional, and make sure that I'm living more fearlessly, because not only is it going to be passed down to my offspring, but it's contagious around, just my tribe right now. So y'all know what we do. Onward and upward, strength and honor. Get to the bag with the big I for integrity. All right, our integrity is I don't want to say it's more important now than ever, but it is more important now, because now is all that matters, right? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, what we do now, because the now is the only thing that's going to impact things moving forward. So with that, I'll let y'all go. Ew.